Hello, my name is Drew and I'm the Aspiring Master, and welcome to the Aspiring Master Presents. This is a show where we talk about the meanings, misunderstandings, and insights about the important words that we use and misuse on a daily basis. Really understanding what we're truly meaning when we talk allows us to convey that meaning and be more understood when we communicate with others. This not only allows us clearer communication so we can get what we need quicker and with less stress, but also allows us to understand ourselves in more depth than we thought possible. Today on our show, we have our special guest, my wife, Talia Wilson, who, as with myself, is an enthusiastic advocate for personal growth and personal awareness. Today is the second episode in our two-part show on the word vulnerability. So let's go. And like I said, our differences are way fewer than our similarities. But the thing is it seems that we've placed those differences as if we are like two species. Like men are from Mars and women are from Venus.
Yeah.
I mean, what a bad book to be able to. Now you're just separating people.
Exactly.
You're not bringing them together.
Exactly. It's like when you said that, it made me think of John Gottman in the Love Lab. You know, people going through bad relationships, so they'll go to the Love Lab in Seattle and be observed for like a weekend, and they do all the like plugging into the heart monitor and all that stuff.
They do your vitals. They like constantly for the 2 days that you're there.
Yeah, and you can do whatever you want normally. You can bring your pets and all that crap. And and it's not about necessarily saving a marriage, but it's helping to get a better understanding of your compatibility as a couple, because there's been couples who've gone to the Love Lab and split up, but they come out of there understanding why they have.
Well, but the Love Lab's designed to study people to find out what really is ailing.
Yeah, what are the differences? What are the issues, and how are they dealing with them, and stuff like that. And when you said men are from Mars, about grouping them apart, and then the Love Lab bringing them together to solve a bigger problem that's bigger than the two people, really. And it's like, it was just an analogy for why can't more things do that? Instead of trying to separate us into men have to be here, women have to be there, why can't we just meet in the middle and party?
And I think that on the level of being the devil's advocate on that, there are differences between men and women, and it's
absolutely.
It's not like there's not. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not saying that, but we're not two different species here.
No. You
have the same type of dopamine receptors that I have. Now, you may not even have as many in certain areas of the brain as I do, but there's lots of men out there that don't have the same receptors that I do.
Exactly.
So we as individuals are so completely different on some levels because we were raised by different people and so on and so on and so on, right?
Well, it also depends on our chemical makeup too.
Right.
Especially when you start now they're a little bit better with identifying the autoimmune disorders, and some of the chemical issues people are having that are causing, certain behaviors and stuff. And at least it helps identify what's going on with a person, that maybe they aren't crazy. Maybe their body is just trying to eat itself or something.
Well, can you imagine if we lived in a society where it was acceptable to be different, and it was also acceptable to say, I have a problem. There's something going on that's not normal. Okay?
Yeah.
That could be a mental issue. Yeah. It could be somebody saying, I have these desires to kill people. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, could you imagine if in a society where somebody said, this isn't normal, it's scary, I have these desires to kill people, I need help. Right? Yeah. Instead of, having to try and hide it from everybody because it's unacceptable and nobody would understand and nobody would, right?
Well, it also access to services too.
Right.
Maybe you're having these feelings and you should, I don't mean to say should, but, go to therapy. But if you can't afford it, or your insurance doesn't cover it, or whatever the thing is, there's not one in your area.
Right.
What are you going to do? Turn to the internet and look for a message board or something,
Well,
I mean,
and you tend to. And
yeah. Well, it's
Oh, I
kind
mean-
of like the grief support groups.
But I mean,
You know.
listen, go to extremes here. There are people out there with extreme things that are happening to them, and they would like help, but they can't tell anybody because those extreme things are frowned upon by their community. Now, it could be an extremely radical idea in, say, a highly religious portion of a highly religious town or whatever. You cannot talk to these people about it. You don't have any outlet for this. And it could be something that's actually illegal, and you're going, I want to get past this. I don't know how to deal with this, but you can't tell anybody because they would just think you're awful and ostracize you. And right, we don't have a society that says you are okay to be human. And if it is something that is detrimental to our society, disruptive to our society, we can help you move past that or through that, right? To be able, because that's a mental difficulty, or it's maybe even a chemical difficulty. We don't know. But we have a society that is so intolerant of differences. And it's no different if you go to Africa and you're a white person there, you're going to be stereotyped and frowned upon and seen as a possible threat. Not everybody. I'm just saying that it's more likely to happen if you're in a different society, that you will be looked on as a threat to that society. So you have to adopt their things, right?
It's like the people who travel overseas and, okay, how long can you go without having to tell someone you're an American and then watch their attitude change toward you?
Right. Well, that's why we became Canadians. Anyway, but I didn't become a Canadian. I already was one.
You already were. Yeah.
But so when we're talking about getting through vulnerability and being vulnerable with people, we're talking about really sharing our humanity with each other and feeling afraid to, because society says that we have to be superhuman in order to be acceptable. We have to be super skinny. We have to be, like all of these stereotypes that we need to be. I mean, it was so tough for my stepdaughter going through school because she had no idea how to be acceptable, right? I'm a weird guy, by the way. Just saying. And so she didn't really get a lot of help from me because I'm an introvert. But I did my best to help her through and to understand her own thinking around it. But it was a big deal to say that, oh, well, they're all talking about Hannah Montana, but we don't have cable and I've never watched the show. So she's ostracized from the group because she can't say anything. Right. And so she feels rejected by her peers because everybody in her peer group was talking about Hannah Montana and what happened last week on Hannah Montana. And, it's like, so she talked to us and we got cable after not having cable for a long, long time because she was being socially rejected for not being part of her peer group's watch list on TV because she didn't have TV. So,
well, I mean, I was in high school when Friends started, and I didn't watch Friends until I think the last 2 years I was in college, and I was only watching regular TV, so I knew what day it was. Because, when you're in college and you're doing all this stuff, all the days run together, So, I mean, in high school, I didn't watch Friends. I watched what my parents watched. So I was watching NYPD Blue and Law & Order, and they're watching Friends and TGIF every week. But it didn't matter because I didn't care, and most of my friends didn't care if I didn't watch Friends,
Well, I mean, and we fall into social groups that accept, and here's where we talk about vulnerability.
Yeah.
A lot of the times you can be what we would consider vulnerable, or you could be yourself. I'm really going to equate vulnerability to being yourself. Really?
Okay.
Being vulnerable as
Yeah.
being yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's your true self. It's really what's happening, not what we pretend to happen, right? So I think that vulnerability is accepting what's really happening, not the pretend person. So you find a peer group that you can be more yourself with. They can understand your emotions and feelings. You feel accepted. You feel like you don't have to be on guard all the time, right? So you can be vulnerable all the time, but you're not open to attack with that group because it's not really vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's only vulnerability when you're with a threatening, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah.
When you're with a threatening group.
I mean, it was a little weird because growing up, I felt kind of apart from my classmates because I lived on the other side of town and I had to get permission to go to the school I went to. So I never saw them like during the summer. In the summer, they'd all hang out because they all lived close to each other. I lived on the other side of town. I had to go to daycare if both my parents were working and my sister wasn't available to hang out. So I didn't see a lot of people. So I always saw them during school. And so it never, when we moved, when I was 11, it was rough, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I was leaving a lot of friends behind anyways. So, but being around adults most of the time and then having to be around people my own age, you know, I got friends in middle school who stayed friends in high school who are still friends today, even though we don't see each other, but we're keep in touch. That was difficult because I watched what the adults watched. I listened to older music, and a lot of people thought it was, and still do, think I'm weird. You still listen to that crap? Yep, and I love every minute of it. At the same time, my friends who were watching Friends by themselves, we would get together and watch old movies, or we'd go to the movies, you know, and stuff like that. They got me into some great newer music. I wouldn't have gotten into like Alanis or anything like that without my friends. Here, listen to this. You might like it, you know. So, I mean, I it's difficult because it's so hard. It's still hard for me to relate to people my own age, you know. I mean, that's why, what do you think I'm married to you? You're way older than me, you know.
I am. Nobody told me that.
So, but at the same time, it was, yeah, I was rejected by a lot of people growing up, but at the same time, I found my weirdos. And we could be weirdos together, even if we weren't always into the same stuff, you know. So, I guess I could be my authentic self.
Right. Well, I mean, to a degree, and I'm not saying that this is there is other vulnerabilities within that group.
Yeah.
That things that you only share with your closest intimate friends, or right, like I mean, it's that you wouldn't share with that other person because you know that they would take it amiss or awry.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if you were sharing it with them, it would be more of a vulnerability, the risk of getting hurt, than it would be sharing it with that person. Now.
Yeah.
When we're talking about courage and bravery in being vulnerable, to go through the pain, and you talked about love and or falling in love, right?
Yeah.
Which is completely different, really.
Yes.
But it's so when you fall in love with somebody, you feel that, you know, on some levels, that's a vulnerability. You have to go through the vulnerability and wanting to fall in love or be in another relationship after being burned, what we call burned, is a really, really tough thing to do and requires courage, because courage or so much neediness that it pushes you forward, because I've seen that too. Right? But on some levels, it does require a bunch of courage to be able to go through the rejection. And a lot of the times, in order to be able to find that peer group that we're talking about, we have to be ourselves, risk the hurt of being ourselves, risk that vulnerability of being ourselves, to be able to find those people that resonate with that peer group that we can trust. And then we can take that, you know, like we're wearing the armor It's like, yeah, no, I'm walking by the heavy metal kids. I've got my armor, right?
Yeah.
At school, I've got that armor, and they're all listening to the headbanging, and you know that they're totally stoned. But you have that armor, and you go, "Oh yeah, man, have a good one, man."
Yep.
You know, that's our armor because you're not part of their group, but we can, like we can cheer them on, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even though we think they're a bunch of hippies, and right or
Nothing
whatever.
wrong with hippies. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we think that we don't really agree with their philosophy, right? We can still put on that face and that armor, right?
Yeah.
If we said what we, like some of the stuff that we really thought, like, hey, why don't you like get off the weed and, or whatever, right? Maybe we risk attack there. There's vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
But we've got the armor. We've got the armor that says, I can't act this way because I know they'll ridicule me if I do. If they see that weakness, they're going to just jump in and attack us, right? And unfortunately, that's part of society. If we show what other people consider weakness, whether it's that group, right? Like, I mean, if I say I'm an agnostic, and so if I'm talking to a group of Christians, perhaps they might jump in and say, why are you agnostic? Because, right? Whatever that is, right? And so I just go, it's not my business. I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah.
So I would not risk that vulnerability with those people because it's not worth my time.
Right.
But if it was my mission, say it was my heart said, I have to go and spread my agnosticism throughout the world, and I may risk that vulnerability. Anyway, I digress. But yes, falling in love is a vulnerability. But when you find that click, or when you find those people, you can take that piece of armor off when you're with them and feel a little bit more human.
Right. Well, and to go
acceptable,
back,
right?
To go back to my high school friends, Slater's right on the edge of the screen.
Oh, I thought that was your fingers.
No, Slater. Having my knee problems in high school was an issue. It was more one of those unspoken things because no one wants to seem like, pick on the girl who fell down because her knee went out of place, type thing. But, it was like little stuff. What do you need? Do you want me to call your mom? Should I get you, and like my friend Steffi, her mom was a nurse practitioner. So my knee actually dislocated at her wedding. Both of them did. And I had painkillers and ice packs within 5 minutes. So, but I mean, that was the thing. It was never an issue. Oh, we can't do this because her knee might go out, Whereas later, dating someone who likes to hike, and it never came up till later. I didn't think you could handle that because you have bad knees. What?
Right.
Okay,
First off, why didn't you ask me? And
why didn't you ask me? And at the time, in my mid-20s, my knees were in great shape because it wasn't that long after surgeries and they hadn't re-stretched back out. So, what? That kind of thing. So, I find that people who maybe you wouldn't expect to understand something like that tend to be the ones who do. Even if they don't understand it, they have, I want to say, a better bedside manner, or they're just cool in a tough situation and they can just, okay, you need help, And it's like, it's interesting when you are, I would say, unconsenting vulnerability like that when you have a physical problem in public. You fall down or something like that and it's out of your control, and the ones who go to help you usually are the ones who surprise you. And do you need anything? Do you need to call anybody? And it's like, yeah. So I think, I don't know what point I'm trying to make here, is that when you're vulnerable with people, when you're not intending to be and you have to be like that, I think that there are some people who can just accept it.
Well, in talking about vulnerability and the risk of being hurt or wounded physically or emotionally, we have to say why be vulnerable at all? Right? Why not be invulnerable and not have that worry you? Right?
Because you can't grow.
Well, I think
Can't feel at such a deep, visceral level. Like, I want to say deep inside your soul. I don't know if I want to use that word. You know? Again, that soft underbelly of emotion.
what comes to mind for me is mastery. And when we're talking, well, I mean, it's like when we're talking about the Buddhist idea of understanding that there is no self, the I am is not really an I am, that it's an illusion, that all of this is an illusion. And I'm not really going to go there, but when we take a look at, when I master something, I have an incredible competence with it, and I trust myself on it. I trust myself that I'm able to do it and willing to do it. And so there's no anxiety. And when I put it out there, there's no risk of getting hurt or anything like that. There's just very, very little risk of anything happening there that's undesirable. So when I'm talking about this, when I'm talking about vulnerability, there does come a time when you're with people that you don't need to wear the armor on, that you are automatically, and this is where I differentiate. Vulnerability is the ability to be vulnerable or to risk the vulnerability, right? I think that when Brene talks about vulnerability, that we need to be vulnerable, I think that all she's saying is we need to be willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Not that we need to be vulnerable. We need to be willing to accept whatever consequence, like you said, whatever consequence comes with putting our true selves out there, right?
Yeah. Or being open to it.
Now, when you and I have talked about this one a lot, like, it's sort of like when I go into a mall, say, and I have dirty pants, right? I just don't care.
Every day.
Right, exactly. I just don't have any, I'm not going, these people are going to reject me, or I just don't have any peripheral worry about that. I don't feel like I'm being vulnerable. And if somebody says, whoa, look at your pants, I would just go away. You're not worth my time. Scuttle away. Go back into your corner. But it's like, I just don't have any worry there. I don't have any what I would be considered vulnerable. I'm invulnerable.
Yeah.
And not because I have armor on, but because I just don't have the receptors for it. Right?
Yeah. Reminds me of going through the drive-through in my pajamas and my bare feet because I just can't be bothered to put on clothes and I'm hungry.
Right. Well, and you just go, I'm not really risking anything because I don't care. Like, these people will see me and they will never see me again. Right?
I mean, and they see everything through a drive-through, so at worst, they're going to laugh at you later. Big whoop. Yeah. Who cares?
But my point is, when we start to talk about vulnerability and when we start to talk about mastery of that, which means being able to walk completely open without taking on any hurt from anybody else, which is sort of a Buddhist thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you understand that that's all nothing, and it is our own personal self and our own personal understanding. And I'm going to make this point because there are certain areas in my life where I've come to say, I see my competence here, right? I know how good I am. And so when I walk into a situation, I don't feel vulnerable at all.
Yeah, but competence is different from mastery.
Well, but that's, it's not really. Mastery is just extreme competence. That's all it is. Okay? It's like there is no such thing as, you can't master a thing. You can only be considered a master when you are extremely competent at it. Okay?
That was the point I was going to make. I was going to take umbrage with mastery because it's like the whole rating your skills on a job application, and I could never ever mark expert because, you know, I mean, this is like what's your knowledge of Microsoft Excel 2007 or whatever? And it's like, I can't reasonably put expert, even though I've taken all the courses, because there's always something to learn. There's always something that's going to change. They always do updates, you know? And that was my umbrage with mastery, is you can't entirely master something.
Well, I mean, you could, and any person that's considered a master will tell you this is never ending.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as mastery of life.
Yeah.
There is only extreme competence in your life. And people see that level of skill and they call that mastery. I agree. I don't think that there is such a place that you don't have anything else to learn in any field. There's always something
exactly.
new. Now, but if you are extremely competent, say if you are considered a master carpenter, right? You're considered a carpenter that is very competent and very knowledgeable, okay?
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying. When you have that kind of mastery, it's sort of like when we talk about me being a DJ. When I walk into a room, right? I have mastery of that room because I've done this for so many years.
Yep.
I've dealt with so many things.
Yep.
And I also have a trust in myself that if anything adverse comes up, I know I can figure out how to deal with it, right?
Well, it's like the people who are the difference between like amateurs and professionals. The same thing. You rarely come across a professional who says, I'm the best at this. I have nothing left to learn. I've peaked, you know, maybe they have peaked and their peaking is choosing their niche or whatever, you know, but it's like the minute you say, I have not this thing cannot teach me anything further, whether it's photography, writing, personal growth, especially, computer skills, you know, I mean, pick a category. The minute you say there's nothing left for me to learn on this, to me, that's the minute you fail.
Well, and
I think the same goes with understanding yourself and expressing yourself and taking the risk, or be willing to take the risk to share that with other people, the world. On that note, I did find a vulnerability hierarchy, and it's like the food pyramid, and it starts with, okay, yourself, maybe one trusted person, maybe a few trusted people, you know, your personal community, your entire community, and then the top, of course, is the whole world, you know. And it's like, that's that I think that you kind of move through that, maybe not as a whole, but maybe on certain subjects. Like you can share, say you have a grief story or like cancer stories, you know, people go through cancer, often share their experiences, stuff, something like that. Okay, you first share it with a friend, then you share it with several friends, then you share it with, you know, maybe your local community, then maybe, you know, like your regional community, and then maybe it goes out on the internet, then and it gets shared with the whole world type thing. So I think that we can evolve our vulnerability and our willingness to put ourselves and our feelings out there, but it's not one whole. I think it's
and
the sum of many parts.
Well, unfortunately, part of that is building up an expectation of what should be happening on that day. Now, guys in general are not really that into doing the holidays and stuff like that. To a guy, it doesn't mean the same thing. Generally, you know, some guys do, but in general, it doesn't mean the same thing. It doesn't mean, you know, if I miss out Valentine's Day, lots of the guys, they miss out Valentine's Day, they're in the doghouse, so they do it under duress. It's not really a real expression. It's only an expression of fear, really, not an expression of love. It's not something that you go out of your way for. I mean, do I celebrate Valentine's Day? Yeah, but I celebrate Valentine's Day sometimes, and mostly because it's not expected. No, because I like doing things that aren't expected, because that is, as far as I consider, a real form of love. while you were talking, it's just like I know that there's a lot of people that identify with me because they feel that I am uh, vulnerable with them. Now, I share a lot of things about myself, but that's because I've already been through all of the stuff that I need to, and sharing that I and it all depends on the situation. Sometimes I don't share
Hmm.
things like that. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it just, again, it's whether the situation lends itself to it and it propels whatever relationship or the person that I'm talking to forward.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm able to share certain things about myself that other people would consider extremely vulnerable. But
Yeah.
because I've already dealt with the emotions and all of my stuff around them, they're no longer a vulnerability to me,
Right.
but they are a sharing of understanding of self
Mhm.
that I share with people when it's appropriate. Um, and that level of sharing and understanding looks like I'm being vulnerable when I'm
Mhm.
not. I
Right.
because I've dealt with all
Yeah.
the underlying fears of
Yeah.
that.
So you have moved
I've
your
already, so
up the
that's what I'm talking
hierarchy.
about. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I've talked about that, I just say that is a certain level of mastery of self
Yeah.
around these situations that other people would say are vulnerabilities or that people would judge me on, right? I'm
Yep.
sharing these things that
Yep.
these people might judge me on, but I am not worried about their judgment, right?
Right.
All I'm worried about in any given situation that I'm sharing these things is those people that can connect and become human with those things. And
Hmm.
there are other people that can't. And there is never going to be a time when everybody's going to agree that, this is vulnerability, that's not vulnerability.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and when I'm talking about mastery, again, I don't feel vulnerable when I'm doing those things with those people because I've dealt with all the underlying fear.
Well, and I think being able to put it out there ultimately is going to help people
Mhm.
because um especially when you're dealing with medical issues that are anomalies or that people just don't understand, and you do research and you find someone who's gone through what you've gone through, or something like that, you feel heard,
Mhm.
even if it's vicariously through somebody else. Okay, somebody else out there knows how I feel or knows how I have felt,
Mhm.
you know. And I think that being able to move through your vulnerability and push it up the hierarchy, you're going to help people.
Well, and I think that,
Someone somewhere is going to find
well,
value
I
in
I
what you're
agree.
saying.
I think that being vulnerable is absolutely necessary because we need to be seen as human.
Yes.
We need to accept ourselves as human, and
Yes.
I think that that's our base level here is when we're talking about vulnerability, and that shame is a really big thing with vulnerability. If you feel like you could be attacked or hurt in any given situation,
Hmm.
the feeling is vulnerability.
Yes.
Okay, you feel vulnerable. Now, when Brene Brown talks about being vulnerable, I think she's talking about a different word. I think she is talking about being human. And it requires sometimes moving through the feeling of vulnerability to get there. And I
Yeah.
think that's sharing humanity. What she's talking
Yes.
about is sharing humanity, not vulnerability. She's
Yeah.
blanket statementing what vulnerability is.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is the fear of emotional or physical attack, okay,
Yes.
or pain.
Yeah.
And the only way to get through that is with courage and bravery. And
Yeah.
yes, we need to get through that so that we can share our humanity. And I think that
Yes.
this is where I sort of wanted to get through to with this, because we've been using, oh, everybody has to be vulnerable. No,
Right.
everybody's got to be able to share their humanity. And sometimes you have to move through the feeling of vulnerability to get to that place
Yes.
of sharing your humanity. And I think that, bottom line, that's why I wanted to do this work, is to
Yeah.
get down to that space. I could feel it. I
Hmm.
wasn't sure
Hmm.
exactly where it was,
Yep.
but I knew that
Yep.
there was something in and off a little
Yeah.
bit with the way that they were using
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Well, and you go and you look up Pinterest is great for this, by the way. Go up and look up vulnerability or personal growth or Brene Brown, and you get those little squares with the quotes. And yeah, now, because that's what I did to prepare for this. And now when you said that, that makes so much more sense.
Doesn't
what
it, though?
she's talking about with vulnerability. And it's like, no, everyone already is vulnerable. It's the sharing and the walking through it and taking that risk. That's what you need to do.
We're all perceive ourselves as vulnerable, and when we walk through it and share and get to the sharing the humanity of who we are, that's the end game. The sharing of the humanity and the vulnerability is absolutely there. Now, if I don't feel vulnerable, say I walk into a DJ situation where I'm walking into a DJ as master of the situation, I don't feel vulnerable at all going into that situation. So there is no vulnerability there. There's only a possibility of pain as we live the life anyway, of something unexpected being there, always a possibility of that, but I don't feel that vulnerability at all.
No, but I think that when you have mastered something like that, even though I don't want to use that word.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've described that.
Okay, you've moved through it. You have grown as a person, and you can walk into a DJ gig with this confidence that you wear with your hat on your head.
I agree.
You know?
Well,
I think that helps people too.
Right. Well, of course it does. And because of my own experience of going through my vulnerability, because when I started DJing, it was a tough thing. I was scared. Am I going to play the right thing? Am I not going to play the right thing? And I had vulnerabilities going into it that I needed the courage or the motivation, whether it's I wanted the end goal of being a DJ, whatever, to overcome. So I grabbed that will with my courage, and I moved through that vulnerability with that bravery, and got to the other side so many times that I no longer needed it, that I was no longer vulnerable there.
Yeah, and then it just made me think that you walk into a place like that, and especially if you're not the MC and the MC is freaking out about having to be on the mic and what all do I announce, and what, do I make jokes? Do I not make jokes? That kind of thing. And because you've done that so many times, and you can just, try this or try that, or make little puns here, or if they do the bride and groom have nicknames, like
but
the id, ego, super ego thing.
Yes,
I mean, then that's the kind of thing that you're able to walk into that situation that doesn't scare you anymore, and you can help someone who is in that situation, maybe in a different role or something, and help them through it.
But that's that in moving through vulnerability, and sometimes you have to move through your vulnerability or your fear of getting hurt a number of times before you no longer have that fear. And if you no longer have that fear, then there's no longer vulnerability there. And that's the point I was trying to make to you earlier about with your friends. You don't have vulnerability there with them. No. You may have vulnerability in other places, but you don't have vulnerability. It's not really called vulnerability when you're with those people, right? Because it's not there. It's the trust has already been there. And so and again, moving into like being the DJ, I have a faith and trust in myself in any given situation that I don't feel vulnerable there ever anymore. So I think that we can move into that space of being able to share our humanity, which is what Brene Brown is really getting at, to be able to share the reality of who you are, the humanity of who you are, being able to cry, being able to do all of the things that you do as a human that we keep hiding from each other, without feeling like you're going to take on pain from other people, right? Then you've removed vulnerability from it, and you are now just expressing your humanity without fear. Right. And I think that that's where we want to get to. Vulnerability is the desire to express your humanity, but with the fear of attack, with the fear of pain. So, and it's that layer between humanity and expressing your humanity and the social world that we call vulnerability. And I think that that's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, and I think also being able to accept that pain may come, rejection may come. You may not accept the pain or the rejection itself, but you're accepting that the consequence, whatever that may be. And I think that, because a lot of people are like, well, rejection hurts. Rejection, I don't want to be rejected. It's like, well, no, of course, no one wants to feel pain. No one wants to get rejected. No one wants to get ridiculed. But you accept the consequences. So you accept that may happen. That doesn't mean you accept the thing itself.
Yep, I agree.
You accept the situation.
But you accept your ability to handle the situation.
Yeah,
really
your
responsibility.
Is what it is. Yeah,
well, your ability to be able to deal with it. I mean, when in any given situation, I still have fear going into DJ things sometimes. Not always and not a lot, but sometimes it happens. And but that's that day that I have self-doubt. That's that day that I have that day where I'm feeling really down on myself, or somebody said something about something else that just transfers over into the rest of my day. That I have that fear, and then I remind myself, I've done all of this stuff before. There's no way that I'm going to diss this. It's not going to, don't worry about it. And that's that other part of myself that is not confident of me.
Well, and I mean, I remember when we were doing the video along with the wedding DJ stuff, and you helped me a few times, and then you would be like, okay, what do we do? And it's like, or that anxiety of having to do the video on top of the DJ stuff. And then you would go, I know I gave you some pep talks a few times, and it's like, dude, once you get in there and that evening starts, that you are just going to rock this thing. Even if you play a song that clears the dance floor, it always happens, they're not going to care.
Oh, it may always happen to you.
Yeah. There's that one guy that wants heavy metal in a rock and roll crowd, but at the same time, ask anyone who goes to a wedding, how was the music? Oh, they played great stuff. And it's usually by the people who never dance, as long as you keep them entertained and, you can see other people having a good time. The party rocked. It doesn't matter whether or not they dance or they interact or whatever. Well, so, I mean, that's the kind of dude, this, you can get through it, man.
And it's that confidence or faith in yourself to be able to share yourself without worrying about other people's opinions.
Exactly.
That is where we wish to get to. And like I said, vulnerability is definitely fear of attack. It's being afraid that you're going to hurt. It's being afraid that you're going to be rejected. It's being afraid of all of those things. Courage is that desire to muster the will that pushes you through, that makes you brave to walk through that fear to get to the other side. And when Brene Brown and a lot of other people are talking about we have to be vulnerable, the truth is we have to risk pain. We have to risk what we call vulnerability in order to express our humanity. And that humanity is not it's not necessarily the same as everybody else's, but we have to understand that we all feel different, that we all have different emotions, that we all have different expressions, and being able to be free. I mean, all we have to do is take a look at the LGBTQ and all of those other letters, and their ability to be able to, the courage that it takes to be able to express who they really are as human beings at that time. That amount of vulnerability on their part and that amount of courage to be able to go through the vulnerability to express their humanness is. And I think that's the thing is Brene Brown is talking about vulnerability, and she's using vulnerability as the bottom line, which is expressing your humanity. And I think that I'm differentiating just that little bit and saying this is vulnerability here. The bottom line is that we were trying to express and feel okay with our own humanity and our expression of it. And I think ultimately, that's why we wanted to take a look at this word, really agree. I agree with the dictionary definition of what vulnerability is, but I also wanted to get to that bottom line of, I think this is what Brene Brown is really talking about, is that we want to express our humanity and accept ourselves in that humanity. right?
Absolutely.
And once you accept yourself in that humanity, expressing that humanity stops being a vulnerability. It now just becomes expressing humanity, and that doesn't matter what your opinion is. Or, I mean, it can be when we're talking LGBT community, expressing that it has a real physical threat to it too,
Yes.
right? That can be, and it can still be a vulnerability that you're doing, but it can't not, it can be a physical vulnerability, but not an emotional one. And I think that what I'm talking about is, well, they can say, I can express who I am and I'm all cool with who I am, but you can say, I'm being vulnerable because there is a real threat that somebody could come along and shoot me, right?
Yeah.
But, and still not, still have that little base fear of physical
Absolutely.
threat, but still not have the emotional threat. So there is that differentiation. But I think really, bottom line, to be able to express yourself as the human that you are and have that courage to go through and the bravery to go through the vulnerability that comes with that. I think that that's our bottom line. I think that that's the show, really.
Okay.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to my wonderful wife, Talia Wilson, for coming on the show. I'm Drew, the Aspiring Master, and we'll see you next time.